Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is going to be talking about something that we all face as Dota players. How to stay calm, how to reset, and how to bounce back from a loss streak. Dota is a mentally and emotionally taxing game that requires consistent focus during highly stressful situations. If you want to shake off the inevitable variance that may occur from game to game, you have to learn how to bring the focus back to the one thing that you can control: you. Now, I'm sure many of you have been told solutions of how to be stoic, how to play your own game, just mute your teammates. The list goes on. And I don't know about you, but being told all that shit never really worked for me. Historically, if you've watched my stream, you will know that I am notorious for turning one mistake into many, one loss into a loss streak, often in the form of self-criticism, dwelling on past mistakes, perhaps rage back in the day, and a lot of blaming my teammates. Not until recently have I finally learned a practical approach for getting out of this funk, getting out of my own head, and getting back into the game and into the present. In this video, I plan to give you a step-by-step guide with examples of exactly how you can recenter your focus, remain cool, calm, and collected, and whether that is within one individually highly stressful game, or after a slew of losses that have you going into the next game already tilted. The three-step solution is simple. 1. Assess the situation objectively. 2. Reflect on how it affects us. And 3. Develop a question to ask ourselves for what we would like to do next time. These steps may seem simple, but let's break them down one by one. Now let's start with step 1. Assess the situation objectively. The life-changing lesson I have learned in regards to this step is to develop a clear distinction between evaluation and observation. Now, before we move forward, it's essential that we define both of these terms and that you guys and I have reached a mutual understanding of what these terms mean. Observation. It is purely descriptive, focused on what is seen, heard, or can be measured. Factual statements that if 1,000 people saw the same thing, they could all agree that the same thing happened. Evaluation includes a judgment, criticism, or interpretation of what is observed, often confuses what actually happened with our opinion about it. Real life example. Observation. Yesterday, you arrived 20 minutes after the agreed time. Evaluation. You are never on time and are inconsiderate towards my time. Do you see the difference with this example? Let's check in and see how you would apply this principle to Dota. Let's watch a clip, and I encourage you at home to pause the video and to write or think at least what you would be saying out loud or in your head if this were to happen during your game. Jumping into our clip, just a bit of context. Dire's up by 17k gold at 31 minutes. They are currently taking Roche as 4, with their mid lane Sand King playing in the top lane. Now let's go ahead and roll the clip. Now let's think of some things you guys might be saying. This Sand King refuses to buy BKB. This Sand King's items are terrible. This Sand King refuses to play with the team. This Sand King is feeding all over the map. This Sand King is griefing the game and making it impossible for us to end. These are all evaluations that are not so unfamiliar within the Dota community. Let's do our best, if you've written down anything similar that includes an evaluation, to then do our best to bring it back to an observation. So as we watch the clip back, let's talk about what the observation is. Our team just killed Roshan, and Sand King is playing by himself on the opposite side of the map, with a Blink, Daedalus, Radiance, and a Boots of Travel in his inventory. And he dies by himself to Axe, Pangolier, and Nature's Prophet, and gives the enemy team 1900 gold. Notice how there was no judgmental language, and that there is no ability to refute or argue anything that I have just stated has happened, because that has factually happened to the Sand King. Going into situation number 2. The important context for this one is that I have last picked Necrophos carry into offlane Timbersaw. And my experience is that this is a highly favorable matchup for Necrophos, and this is basically a free farm lane, and that we should expect to have a significant advantage. So let's go ahead and play out the clip. Now, I hope all of you have taken the time to write it down, or at least think about what you would be thinking if you were the Necrophos here. I can tell you what I used to be thinking. Where is my 5 position player? He's being useless. Why am I dying by myself solo? How am I feeding to a Timbersaw when I'm heavily advantaged in this lane? These are all forms of evaluation. My silencer isn't playing with me like he's supposed to. This is a lane that we should win, and my 5 is ruining the lane. I fed like an idiot, and I played too far up. Now that explanation is riddled with evaluations. I said how I think my silencer is supposed to play. I said how I think this lane is supposed to go. I said what I did was wrong rather than objectively what happened. Let's reword that as an observation. Now let's watch the clip back and try our best to describe it as an observation. My silencer is dewarding the pole camp. I take half my HP and damage to Snapfire while my silencer is not there. Timber hits level 2 before me, and I proceed to die getting chased down in the lane. Now, I talked about these 3 examples, the 2 within the Dota game and the 1 in real life, because we are talking about step 1 of the 3-step solution, which is to assess the situation objectively. And there is one problem we run into if this step in the solution contains an evaluation. What an evaluation does is it provides an explanation for what has happened. Whether it was because my Sand King was griefing, my silencer's throwing the lane, because I fed in lane, that is the problem. Our evaluation leaves us no longer seeking an explanation. It short circuits our self-awareness because the evaluation feels like an explanation and they obscure the observable facts. They can trigger shame, defensiveness, ego. Telling yourself you fed or you suck creates an attack on yourself rather than a curiosity about the situation. Saying that your teammate is griefing or that he's a noob is assessing that his lack of skill is the cause for your problem, and now there's nothing you can do about it anyways. So, whenever you are thinking about things in terms of evaluations, we need to transform that into an observation plus a need. Observe what has happened, and the need is what we need to do next, or perhaps what skill we would need to work on to do better next time if it's a mistake of our own. So how do we learn to implement step 1? For every mentality lesson, I believe it starts with an awareness phase. What I encourage you to do as an exercise is to write down after a game what your thoughts were during these types of moments. Be as precise as possible. Read them back. Label anything you see as an evaluation. At this point, just pay attention to how often you do this. After you feel like you have a clear idea of the frequency of which you do this and the types of situations that trigger you to do this, we can then begin to figure out how to reword this into an observation. Words that I would strongly discourage from using that I believe are immediately red flags for triggering evaluations are words like should, supposed to, right, wrong, griefing, ruining, any character descriptors, rager, dog, idiot, noob. I think you guys get the picture. Once you are comfortable rewording your thoughts as observations, you will notice that something is missing. There is simply no explanation of what has happened. You know what happened, but not why. No practical takeaway. And your brain, it's human nature, it wants an answer. It wants an explanation. It wants to reason out how to solve this problem and why it's happening. That takes us to step 2. Step 2, as mentioned earlier, is to reflect on how this affects us. So let's go back to the Sand King example. Sand King has just died top, and Night Stalker TP top and used his ultimate in order to try to help the Sand King who is already dead. So how does this affect us? Even though we have an Aegis and all of our abilities except for Night Stalker ultimate, we are missing our mid laner. So we need to be cautious. Now let's go straight from step 2 into step 3, which is to develop a question to ask ourselves for what we would like to do next or what we would like to do next time. So 2 wonderful questions that I have found for when a teammate dies like this are as follows. What do I need to do while he is dead? Try not to die to the blade mail call of Axe. Split push waves to get information, to force enemy reactions, and to avoid fights if possible, which is what we see them doing in this game. The next question is, what would I like to do when he respawns? The answer to this question is, look to group up with Sand King when he respawns, and we also have Night Stalker ultimate again, which is going to be in 2 minutes. If he TPs away from the team, which is something we have to consider him doing, let's smoke towards him to include him in the fight. So once again, these questions are, what would we like to do while he's dead? And what would we like to do when he respawns? This immediately maps out the near future for what we'd like to do in the game and detracts our attention away from any frustration, tilt, feeling of powerlessness, and rage towards our teammates. Now, let's repeat step 2 and step 3 for our other situation with Necrophos. Step 2, reflect on how this affects us. The lane is not going to be as stompy as originally predicted. I may need to play to recover rather than play to be aggressive. Step 3, develop a question and ask myself what I would like to do next time or next in the game. In this case, I found that situations where the lane goes against my expectations, it's very important for me to ask the following question. What items do I need for my new situation? Who are the threats to me on the map? And how far up do I want to play now that I'm behind in lane? This triggers me to respond with, I want to buy movement speed items to keep away from the cookie and potential Leshrac rotations. Consider looking to jungle early because Leshrac can solo kill me with level 6. And look to potentially go Boots of Travel to move around the map or rush a Radiance with farming passively, as opposed to the Spirit Vessel that I was originally planning to use to dominate the Timber in the mid game. Now, if you're with me this far, here is my theory. When evaluations are used instead of observations in step 1, from situation to situation, from game to game, you often don't even get to step 2 or step 3. There is no critical thinking, situational awareness, self-reflection, and figuring out what to do next time. There's a lot of dwelling, a lot of raging, whining, emotionally driven language that does not serve us to improve the next time. We are going to be living in the past of our former teammates that let us down, of the mistakes that we made in previous games, and we are going to be carrying those into future games with us. The whole premise of this video was preaching to you guys how to recover from a loss streak. And I believe that a loss streak is often littered with this type of evaluation of ourselves, evaluation of our teammates, which prevents us from being able to assess critically and come back refocused, recentered, and able to think as clearly as possible in the future games and during the rest of the game itself. Now, to recap this video, if there is one takeaway that I hope all of you guys can have, is to learn to value the distinction between observations and evaluations. Evaluations of other people's character, intentions, skill level, and also your own character, intentions, and skill level. These evaluations leave us with an explanation for what has happened and leave us no longer curious to find an answer and to problem solve for next time. I have one promise for you guys. If you replace the evaluations that take place in step 1 of this process with observations, and instead focus your evaluations on the future towards what you would like to do next time and what you would like to do next in your current game, my promise is this, that you will struggle far less with loss streaks, and you will struggle far less with turning one mistake into many. It is important to remember that this is not a linear growth process. There will be times that you slip up. There will be times where you resort to your old ways. Trust me, you'll see me on my stream doing it all the time. But the journey from A to B will be meaningful and you will feel the long-term results. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Talking about these types of subjects means so much to me, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about these mentality type videos in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video.